In the dead of night, an unexpected sound disrupts the silence and paves the way for a revelation kept secret for decades. The meeting of two generations, marked by silent sacrifices and misunderstood grievances, exposes truths capable of transforming old wounds into bridges of reconciliation. Amidst memories of a lost past and the desire to rebuild what seemed irreversible, a story of love, sacrifice, and rebirth emerges. One of those that show how sometimes the end is just the beginning. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. The digital clock on the nightstand read 1:57 in the morning when Evelyn awoke with a start. A sharp knock on the door had cut through the silence of the house like a sharp blade. She sat up in bed, her heart racing, trying to discern between dream and reality. The apartment was enveloped in silence. Only the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of the old heater filled the void. Perhaps she had imagined it. She leaned back again, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The cold of that season seeped through the window cracks, despite the heater. Evelyn's fingers clutched the worn fabric of her favourite quilt, a gift from her grandmother that had survived countless moves and tough years. Just as she was about to succumb to sleep again, a series of firmer, more deliberate knocks reverberated through the walls. It wasn't her imagination. Someone was at her door. Evelyn's body tensed up. She had lived alone for years in that small two-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a building with no elevator. It was a quiet neighborhood, where the loudest noise came from the elderly couple in the apartment next door arguing about TV shows on Sunday afternoons. Who could it be at this hour? She pulled her cell phone from the charger. No missed calls, no messages. She slid out of bed, her feet finding the worn slippers on the threadbare carpet. She put on the shabby robe over her flannel pajamas and, hesitant, crossed the dark hallway. The only light came from the small lamp on the coffee table in the living room, which she always left on at night, a habit she had maintained since childhood when fear of the dark made her imagine monsters lurking in shadowy corners. He approached the door cautiously, stopped a few steps away, listening intently. Silence had resumed its reign. Perhaps it was just a drunk neighbour who had mistaken the apartment. Then a voice emerged from the other side. "Open up. I have something to tell you." Evelyn's blood ran cold in her veins. She knew that voice. It was the voice of Margaret, her mother. She approached the peephole, her breath shallow. Yes, it was her. Margaret stood in the dimly lit hallway, her grey hair tousled by the wind, her coat buttoned incorrectly, as if she had left in a hurry. With trembling fingers, Evelyn unlocked the door. The last time she had seen her mother was at her graduation, 5 months earlier, a brief and tense encounter, like all their meetings in recent years. "Mum!" Evelyn's voice came out weak. "What happened?" Margaret was different. Her brown eyes, always attentive and practical, now seemed distant, as if they had travelled through time. However, there was something else there, a kind of determination that Evelyn hadn't seen in a long time. "May I come in?" Margaret asked, her tired voice revealing each of her 63 years. Evelyn stepped back, making way. The familiar scent that always accompanied her mother filled the apartment, bringing with it fragments of memory that Evelyn had tried to bury. Margaret entered, observing the small apartment with keen eyes. She noticed the pile of books stacked in the corner of the room, the makeshift bookmarks sticking out of their pages. She saw the coffee cups abandoned on the small table, the plants on the windowsill, ferns and succulents, the only ones Evelyn managed to keep alive. She observed the framed photographs on the wall. Evelyn at her high school graduation, Evelyn with friends at college, Evelyn receiving her university degree. No family pictures. "Are you okay?" asked Evelyn, crossing her arms over her chest. "It's almost midnight." Margaret took a deep breath as if gathering courage. For a moment, Evelyn saw the same expression her mother had made years ago when she needed to deliver difficult news, bills that couldn't be paid, promises that couldn't be kept. "I need to tell you something, Evelyn. Something I should have said a long time ago," The tone of her voice made Evelyn freeze. It was serious. Instinctively, her thoughts raced to the worst-case scenarios. "Are you sick?" she asked, feeling a lump form in her throat. Margaret shook her head. "No, that's not it." She paused. "May I sit?" Evelyn gestured to the sofa, a second-hand piece she had bought at a sale. Margaret sat down, her hands resting in her lap, fingers intertwined so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Do you remember the bookstore?" asked Margaret, looking at a distant point beyond the window. The question caught Evelyn by surprise. Of course she remembered. Page's bookstore, the family business for 3 generations, had been the backdrop of her childhood. She remembered the smell of paper and ink, the polished wooden shelves her grandfather had built, the small stool where she sat to read while her mother attended to customers. She remembered the coffee served at the back of the store, the comfortable chairs where students and readers spent hours, the afternoons of book signings and poetry readings. And she remembered with painful clarity the day when all of that disappeared. "How could I forget?" replied Evelyn, bitterness returning to her voice. "It was the only home I knew for 17 years. Margaret nodded, her eyes finally meeting her daughter's. "You always thought I sold the bookstore to pay off your father's gambling debts." It wasn't a question. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Robert, the father, had been a charming and unstable man, alternating periods of excessive affection with long absences. When Evelyn was 15, he had disappeared for weeks, only to return briefly, take more money, and vanish for good. He left behind a pile of gambling debts, angry creditors, and a shattered family. 2 years later, the bookstore was sold. Margaret never fully explained the details, but Evelyn knew. Her father had ruined everything. And her mother, too weak and too much in love, had allowed it. "And isn't that what happened?" Evelyn's voice hardened. Margaret took a deep breath, as if each word was a weight being lifted from her shoulders. "No, Evelyn, that's not what happened." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with years of resentment and assumptions. "The truth is, I sold the bookstore to pay for your education." Margaret finally spoke, the words coming out as if they had been rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind. "Your father left debts, yes, but we managed to negotiate them. We could have saved the store." Evelyn felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "What?" "That university you wanted so much," Margaret continued, her voice gaining firmness. "The scholarship covered only part of the costs. There were the books, the accommodation, the travel expenses. It was an expensive dream, Evelyn." Evelyn remembered the thick envelopes that arrived from prestigious universities, the colourful brochures promising bright futures. She remembered how her mother encouraged her, even when the prospects seemed bleak. "But you always said that the bookstore—" "I said what I thought you needed to hear." Margaret smiled, a sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It was easier for you to hate me for being weak with your father than to know that I had sacrificed something you loved for your future. I didn't want you to carry that burden." Evelyn sat heavily in the opposite armchair, the implications of that revelation falling on her like an avalanche. All the times she had judged her mother, all the heated arguments, all the Christmases ruined by bitter comments about the past, all based on a misunderstanding. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes moist but bright with new resolve. "Because I saw you at your graduation, Evelyn. I saw you receiving your diploma, strong and accomplished. I saw the path you built for yourself despite everything, and I realized that we no longer need this secret between us." Tears began to stream down Evelyn's face, silent and uncontrollable. She remembered all the nights she spent in the bookstore, hidden among the shelves, absorbing stories and dreams. She remembered the worn wooden bench where she did her homework, the doorbell that announced each customer's arrival, the smells of paper, coffee, and possibilities. All that universe had been exchanged so that she could create a new one for herself. "I spent so much time blaming you." Evelyn murmured, her voice choked with emotion. Margaret reached out a hand, hesitant, as if she didn't know whether she had the right to comfort her daughter. And I let you blame me. It was easier that way. In that moment, Evelyn saw her real mother for the first time in years. Not the weak and submissive figure she had imagined, but a woman who had made difficult choices and carried her burdens in silence. Why now, Mum? Why in the middle of the night? Margaret smiled, a fragile but genuine smile. I went to the doctor today. Nothing serious, just a checkup. She paused. But it made me think about how much time I've wasted holding on to secrets that no longer needed to be kept. Life is too short, Evelyn. I couldn't sleep. I needed to see you. Evelyn stood up, and after a moment of hesitation, sat down next to her mother. Her fingers found hers, intertwining as they hadn't done since her childhood. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was a silence of understanding, of mutual recognition. 6 months had passed since that night. Spring had arrived, bringing new beginnings in its wake. Evelyn, now with her career established as an editor at a prestigious publishing company, had diligently saved every extra penny. Her recent promotion had been the final push she needed to put into action the plan she had been developing since her mother's night visit. That Saturday afternoon, Evelyn guided Margaret, blindfolded, through the streets of downtown. Her heart was racing in her chest, a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Evelyn, where are we going?" asked Margaret, giggling, allowing herself to be led by her daughter. "Just a few more steps," replied Evelyn, positioning her mother exactly where she wanted. "Ready? You can open your eyes." Margaret removed the blindfold and blinked several times, adjusting to the light. When her vision finally focused, her entire body froze. In front of her, a glass and wood facade displayed an elegant sign. Last page. It was a bookstore. Not exactly like the old pages, but carrying its spirit. The same colours, the same cosy feeling, but with a contemporary touch. "Evelyn." "What is this?" whispered Margaret, her voice trembling. Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and excitement. "It's ours, Mum. The last page is our new bookstore." Margaret covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes teary. "How did you—" "I saved, invested, took out some loans, convinced a few investors." Evelyn shrugged, as if it were nothing. "The publishing house I work for will be our partner for events and launches." Margaret stepped forward, touching the display window as if she couldn't believe it was real. "But why? Your career, your life." "Because you gave up your dream so that I could achieve mine." Evelyn held her mother's hand. "Now it's my turn to give back a little of what you gave me." Evelyn extended a small blue velvet box. Inside, a golden key glistened under the afternoon sun. "Last page?" Margaret repeated the name, her fingers tracing the golden letters on the facade. "Because every ending is just the beginning of a new story." Evelyn smiled. "And our story is just beginning, Mother." The two of them entered the bookstore together. The bell above the door tinkled with the same familiar sound as years ago. The aroma of new books and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. On the walls, old photographs of Page's bookstore mingled with empty spaces, ready to be filled with new memories. In the centre of the store, a small wooden bench, the same bench where Evelyn had spent so many afternoons of her childhood, restored and polished, awaited under the soft light that streamed through the windows. Margaret walked slowly through the space, touching the shelves, the tables, breathing in the atmosphere as if she wanted to absorb it completely. "You know what I like most about the name," she finally said, turning to Evelyn with a smile that lit up her entire face. "Last page doesn't mean an end. It means that even when we think a story is over, there's always another one waiting to be discovered." Evelyn nodded, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in years. She watched her mother moving through the space, as if she had rediscovered a lost part of herself, and knew she had made the right decision. Some secrets, when revealed, do not destroy. They transform. Some losses, when understood, make room for greater gains. And some last pages are, in fact, just the beginning of more beautiful stories. The doorbell tinkled again. The first customer had arrived. Margaret straightened her shoulders, her face lit by a smile Evelyn hadn't seen since her childhood. "Welcome to the last page." Margaret's voice flowed, confident and warm. "How can I help you?" Evelyn watched from afar, smiling. Some stories need to be rewritten to be understood, and this one, their story, was only in its first chapter. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.